Yeah, the staff who put this together have been just amazing. I'd like to add my personal thanks for that. Elspeth, everybody has been amazing. I guess, well, what do I take away? Unfortunately, I've reached a stage in my career where I've interviewed quite a lot of people, but I must say, interviewing Christo, I should really be standing up as I say this, and I should have had yogurt and garlic for breakfast. I'm planning on doing these things and then eliminating lunch, but I did find it one of the most riveting and extraordinary and uplifting journalistic experiences that I've had in what is now a 40-plus year career as a journalist. The combination of his energy, his vitality, his dedication, his belief, his humility really made an enormous impression on me. And I thought about this sense of collective, universal, really, wonderment that Christo's creations seem to inspire. And I was thinking about what it is. And really, there is an extraordinary beauty and magical quality to what he creates. Just looking at that 1 mile of Sydney coastline that he wrapped. Why would he wrap it? What an idea. Why wrap the Reichstag? And yet, when you see it, it's as if there's a revelation of what truth and beauty are. And that, in the end, as Yeats observed, is what art is all about. So that, for me, was a marking experience. I've thought a few times during the conference I have echoing in the back of my mind what President Trump has said about the Middle East. It's a big mess. It's just a giant mess. It's one big mess. I've just inherited this mess. It's a terrible mess, disaster, violence. Well, no. The Middle East, like other regions of the world, and perhaps more so, is a region of contrast. Yes, there's a lot of violence. There are a lot of problems. And they're focused in Syria, which has been devastating. It's shameful what has happened, been allowed to happen in Syria over the last 5 or 6 years. But that's not the only truth of the Middle East. And I've wished a few times during this conference that perhaps some member of the President's administration could have been here to look at the faces in front of me now, to see the diversity of the Middle East, to see the way the Middle East is changing here in the Gulf and elsewhere, to see the hopes and aspirations that exist in the Middle East and that were so evident 5 or 6 years ago when I was in Tahrir Square, when I was in Benghazi, when I was in Tunisia, and I witnessed this tremendous thirst for agency, for citizenship in a Canadian sense, if you like, the possibility to act, to change societies, not just to be a pawn of despotic dynasties. And that, I think, is still alive, that aspiration in the Middle East. So that was another thought here. And just finally, this has been all about openness, conversation. At times, I think we've all felt a frisson of tension in the room as somebody pushed a boundary, as somebody went a little beyond, perhaps, what we were expecting, and maybe there was an element of a little bit of discomfort. Well, that frisson is good. That discomfort is good. Civilized disagreement is the mark of every healthy society, whatever precise form it takes. If we lose the capacity for civilized disagreement, we are lost. And that is being threatened around the world today. In my lifetime, I've never seen the world in such a combustible moment. So I think that message of openness, of dialogue, of pushing the margins, of living with those elements of discomfort we all feel from time to time when challenged, that to me was one of the most uplifting elements in our conversations over the past 3 days. Thank you.
I would say, first of all, I was very encouraged by the group of you. I've, don't underestimate kind of the energy that we get coming from the people who are listening, and I felt like this was a particularly engaged audience, which I really deeply appreciated. And just watching, panel after panel, I felt like you were right there with us in exploring what turned out to be some very interesting subjects. I myself found myself just wanting to pay attention. I thought it was, a particularly stimulating group of subjects and people. And in particular, for me, when I cover the art market in New York, I think what this really teaches me is that there's a much larger art world. And that was also a strain that ran through a lot of conversations. Opening up beyond the celebrity names, the usual suspects, the big money that gets, for better or worse, seems to command attention. Yes, when a Modigliani sells for over $100 million, that's big news for us. But the art world is obviously that so much bigger, and so many of the artists that I interviewed and my colleagues did, I thought attested to that. The level of their commitment and passion was palpable and inspiring. Idris Khan, Amalia Ullman, Subodh Gupta, Abdul Nasser Garam come to mind as particular examples. Aside from the Christos and the Bob Wilsons, who are larger than life personalities, these are people really sort of in the trenches day in and day out, doing their thing and making a difference. And I also found that level of commitment extended to the other fields. Whether you had Chris Michaels talking about thinking digitally about the British Museum, I think every museum would benefit from that, from kind of hearing him, the depth in which he has sort of dug into that issue, because it's one that every single institution is grappling with. Julian Payne talking about designing money. Who knew, that there was such artistry behind, something that's on a bill, and you'll never look at them the same. And or Peter Stone talking about kind of protecting cultural property, which he is very fervent about and has been. I feel like these are the people sort of who are really behind the scenes and don't often get the credit, but it's nice to sort of bring them on stage here.
For my part, I would say the theme of identity came up a lot this year, the identity of an artist and the identity of a nation as reflected by its museums, and cultural institutions. We had artists from Saudi Arabia who are affirming their identity in the face of censorship, and speaking of the importance of that, we had the artist Idris Khan, who is half Pakistani and half Welsh, and somehow manages to mesh those two identities in his art in a kind of seamless way without there being any kind of tension within him, it seems. We had female artists who talked about representing their alter egos on Instagram, on Second Life. What is the identity of a female artist nowadays? Well, that's really shifting a lot. And we had other female artists more from this part of the world or from the broader Middle East and Arab world countering these overarching representations of women and coming up with their own representations. And finally, of course, last but not least, we had the artist Bob Wilson asserting his identity, his very unique identity as an artist, in a talk that really turned into a piece of performance art, and I think gripped quite a few of you. I think also that in terms of the theme of national identity, cultural officials from Germany, for instance, they spoke about the need to give a more universal and less limited vision of what German identity is through the museums and cultural institutions of that country. So the whole notion of what is a museum and what is the role of a museum is being redefined, not only in Germany, but in many places, and including right here in the Gulf, because we have some giant openings of museums which will, I am sure, redefine Abu Dhabi and redefine Qatar yet again with these extraordinary works of art or pieces of architecture that will kind of give a more refreshed and renewed image of their respective nations. And I have to say that all of us up here have had a large number of talks to moderate, and we've been burning the candle at both ends preparing them. But as they've both said, and it's amazing how all three of us are really on the same page. We've had a lot of fun up here, And I know I speak for my fellow moderators when I say that we've been touched by your attentiveness and by your level of sensitivity to what's going on up on the stage. We have been witnessing moments when, well, one participant, who I'm looking at right now, told me after one particular panel, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. And he's a grown man. And so there were moments of emotion, which is not really common in conferences, I would say. Certainly not, conferences, New York Times conferences like luxury or oil. I don't think people are dabbing their eyes, pulling out their tissues. So may I end, just as my colleagues did, first by paying homage to the extraordinary team that has made this possible. Elspeth, Louise, and the great Aidan Walker, who has put together a really terrific program, allowing us all. I think that's Aidan there. Aidan and of course Achilles, and there are many other colleagues who we really adore up here and who have really made our job wonderful. But also, may I end with an homage to all of you. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you.